So one of the really neat things about Hollywood Cemetery is that it's as old as it is. In the US, a lot of things just aren't that old, but this was one of our very first settlements here on this continent, and the cemetery's not that old, but it is old. It's back to the 1800s. There are a ton of Confederates buried here, because of course we're in Richmond, capital of the Confederacy. Not just Confederate soldiers, but like notable Confederates. One of my favorite monuments is actually right in the heart of the Confederate section, which I have mixed feelings about, but I'll see if I can find that for you. It's a huge sprawling cemetery, so I don't always get where I intend to go when I'm here. One of the downsides to Hollywood Cemetery, at least from my perspective as somebody who just wants to come walk around a beautiful park full of gravestones, is that it is still an active cemetery. There are still people being buried here, I mean, I wouldn't say every day probably, but on a regular basis. And that means you have to be a little more mindful about being respectful. Of course, you should always be respectful when you're in a cemetery. There's obviously the historical aspect. And for a lot of people, even though you may share my belief that a corpse is an empty shell and what you do with it is for the benefit of the families and the people mourning, even if you share that belief, you gotta recognize that a lot of people don't, and that they put a lot of value on these corpses, on these bodies, even after the animating force, whatever that may be, has left it. So obviously you should always be respectful in a cemetery. That gets a little bit trickier and a little more complex when that cemetery might be having a funeral that day. While I don't have any qualms about sitting here in the cemetery filming a vlog and showing you some of the beautiful gravestones, this is not something I would do if there were an actual funeral nearby. People are mourning and you need to be a decent human being and let them mourn. I don't know if you can see the sweat trickling down my face, but it is approximately balls hot outside today, which is absurd, not only for September 22nd, but today is the autumnal equinox. It should not be this hot out here. All of which is to say that this visit may be a little bit shorter than I had originally planned. Unreasonably hot or not, it's still a beautiful cemetery. I came over here because I thought I'd spotted what looked like an overgrown bench, but now that I'm looking to either side of that bench, what I'm realizing is that is in fact somebody's gravestone that has been knocked completely over. So that's great. In fact, behind me, you can see there's some sort of maintenance going on. Not sure exactly what's happening there, but it looks like a stone was broken and is maybe being replaced. Some of those stones are not broken. I don't know. There were also a bunch of large branches near that broken gravestone area, so I'm hoping that that's just some storm damage and not vandals, because that would really make me sad. Storm damage is one thing, weathering over the years is one thing. People actively fucking with a cemetery just pisses me off, though. I had put this parasol away for a little while because I wanted to give you a good view of the cemetery as I walked. But I can already see pinkness starting in my chest because I am pale and did not wear appropriate sunscreen, so we're back to using the parasol. Sorry. I stopped to try and take a photo of something, and two creepy old white dudes in a pickup truck slowed to a crawl to stare at me. And when they finally came to an actual stop, they said, "Hey." I said, "Hi. How are you doing?" "I'm fine, thanks." Like, what was that about? Then they drove off. They clearly didn't need to ask me anything. They weren't looking for directions. They didn't feel I was doing something inappropriate enough to actually, you know, say something to me about it. They were just being creepy. awesome. That's about all the cemetery wandering I have time and energy for today. On a day this hot, having eaten nothing but a Cliff Bar all day.